Welcome back to NewsWire. Time for us to check in with Pat Evans from Legal Sports Report. We got some updated news on the company Betway. They are bailing from action here in the United States. We'll get to that here in just a minute. But first, let's check in with Pat on the very latest on DraftKings. Pat, thanks for coming on the show. I read this yesterday, and so here is kind of my question. So I see that DraftKings is getting fined $100,000, and I also understand that you guys reported that it was for reporting inaccurate sports betting data. Why would a company get fined $100,000 for reporting inaccurate sports betting data? What is it specifically that would lead to that? That's what I don't understand from this.
Yeah, so this is kind of an interesting case. It's DraftKings, came out. They responded to the letter from the New Jersey regulators and said it was a coding issue that kind of accounted for parlay bets from other bets, and so it skewed the numbers a little bit. Under their argument, they said, it doesn't really affect the overall revenue. It shouldn't affect the state level taxes, all that stuff. But the regulators came back and said, well, no, it did affect our reporting. We put out bad numbers for the first time in at least 13 years. We had to issue a correction. And, DraftKings now says they fixed the coding from the new kind of program they were using at that point. And basically it comes down, it seems like New Jersey regulators are just really upset they had to, issue a correction on some misreported numbers. It is a huge fine for New Jersey. I think they also issued a fine from 2022 yesterday for about $2,000 to FanDuel for a violation. So, that shows kind of the discrepancy and how serious they're taking this issue. And the chief regulator had some really strong words. I urge people to go read that story at LSR and kind of read her quotes, because it kind of takes DraftKings to task, even though they've tried to come back and fix everything as best they can and correct their wrongs. But yeah, it's a pretty significant fine from New Jersey on DraftKings, and it shows how serious the DraftKings regulators or the New Jersey regulators are taking this issue.
Yeah, DraftKings regulators not as much, apparently, from this story. Okay, so let's dive into, it looks like we're going to go through 2024 on the very quiet side for sports betting being legalized, at least for the third and fourth quarter. Let's get to Delaware here. What's the latest on their bill to pass?
So, yeah, Delaware just went live with their online sports betting offerings through Bet Rivers and the lottery earlier this year. But around the same time, a legislative report came out from a study group that was allowed last year or created last year that said, hey, let's open this market. We need to open up to more operators. We can bring in more tax revenue that way. And so, a bill was introduced this session to say, okay, let's go beyond the lottery. Let's allow the 3 casinos in Delaware to each have 2 skins. That would, provide pretty much the base level national operators that we're seeing in most states come in and have a nice, robust market there in Delaware. But it did not gain any traction in the legislature. It just kind of died with the session. So we're at least one more year of just a lottery monopoly and Bet Rivers in Delaware with online sports betting. Kind of what it looked like was a lot of legislators kind of had hesitancies to pass it because they were like, well, we just launched. Let's see what it can do as just a monopoly before we really try to mess with the market at all. So like you said, we're not seeing very much action in terms of new markets or even expanding markets, and Delaware staying the same this year.
Okay, finally, let's get to the story that broke this morning. I saw Mike Mazzio report this on social media, and I'm happy to have you on, Pat, to follow up. 2 companies, Betway, who I've heard of, Sahara Bets. I could not even told you that Sahara Bets was even around in the United States. No disrespect to them, but I had never heard of it. Betway, I think I'm more popular because I see their logos and everything on these soccer matches in European leagues and things like that. Did they just not have success, Pat, here in the United States because they announced that they're no longer going to be operating here?
Yeah, so Supergroup, the Betway owner, has decided, and this was kind of hinted at back at the beginning of the year or even late last year when our Matt Waters kind of was doing some digging into earnings reports and stuff, and Supergroup kind of hinted at the idea that Betway would be pulled out of North America. And sure enough, today we get an announcement that Betway's gonna leave the 9 states they are live in, just because, as the CEO put it in the statement, we just don't see a long-term path to profitability. And I mean, in the 9 states they're in, they've got pretty small market share, single digits, low single digits. And so, yeah, that just kind of shows how, DraftKings, FanDuel, BetMGM, Caesars, the big names, they've got plenty of kind of market share to make things work and kind of fix things around. But when you're playing at numbers that low and you're a big European operator, it's not so great. I mean, this is at least the second big European operator that we've seen pull out of North America. Late last year, Unibet or Kindred pulled Unibet out of North America. And so it just kind of goes to show you that just because you're big in Europe doesn't mean you're going to be successful in the U.S. And that is to say, I mean, they had a huge deal with the NHL. If you watch the NHL playoffs, you saw the Betway logo all over.
Yep.
To your point, soccer, I mean, even Ted Lasso, one of the main teams in there was Betway. So they got lots of brand exposure in North America and just have not been able to move very much of a needle here. And so they'll be getting out fairly soon, I would expect. They are going to maintain their online casino operations here. They're live in Pennsylvania and New Jersey. They see much more potential there. They said they'll expand in markets as opportunities arise there. Now, Sahara Bets, to your point, is interesting. They were only live in Arizona.
There you go.
They were the partners of the Arizona Coyotes because the same owner owned the company and the sports book. And with the Arizona Coyotes selling off their assets and the team going to Utah and an inactive franchise effectively being abandoned by the owner recently because of some he had hoped to revive it within the next 5 years with a new stadium or a new arena. And I would assume that would have kept the Sahara Bets kind of brand alive, but they're leaving. They never got much of a market share in Arizona either. And so this is, it was kind of expected, I think, once we knew that the Coyotes were no more, that Sahara Bets would also be no more. What is interesting is Betway was also live in Arizona, and we're in the midst of an open Arizona license process. So once Betway leaves, that'll be down to 14 active licenses. There can be up to 20. So there's lots of licenses open in Arizona. I don't know what kind of operators are out there that could find any interest in Arizona at this point, because in the last two open license processes, Bet365 and Fanatics, which were kind of the only major operators out there looking to get anywhere, were introduced into the market. So, maybe Circa Sports with their proximity with the giant Circa Resort up in Las Vegas, or Underdog Sports kind of starting their real sports book experience, they might be interested. But 6 sportsbook slots is quite a few for a state like Arizona, which is a top 8 sports betting market in the U.S. in terms of handle. So there is lots of opportunity, but again, 90% is dominated by the FanDuel, DraftKings, Caesars, and BetMGM. So not a ton of space for the rest of them.
Yeah, indeed. All right, so let's close it out. I know that you were in Canada covering sports betting conference there. Really interesting story and something I don't think we've ever talked about here. Calgary Stampede, one of the largest annual rodeos, signs a contract with Play Alberta. Now, 2 questions here. How did this come together? And the second one, if you could make it quick here, can you bet on the rodeo? Like, I'm not even aware of this. Is this something you could bet on?
Yeah, Play Alberta is the solo operator as it stands right now, though Alberta will be opening up to more commercial operators. So this kind of seems like a significant partnership once you really dig down deep, because the Calgary Stampede welcomes 1.4 million people every year, and Alberta is only a province of like 4 million people. So it's a huge amount. And Play Alberta will be offering the Stampede event betting for the first time ever. So it's a really unique, weird partnership, but I think it works for Alberta, which is a very Western, Southwestern type experience in Canada.
All right, real cool. Thanks, Pat, for coming on. Really appreciate it. We'll talk again next week.
Thanks as always, Craig.